runs in my veins. I've been in secret to L. Ron Hubbard Hollywood life exhibits, where his latest victim leads me on a tour of a life he never led, my family written out of existence. And this disciple will never know the legacy of lies that I still carry in my last name. Dewolf, a cover story to protect us from my great-grandfather's true children, the army of empty, who greet me in train stations with an e-meter and a personality test, and they ask me if I've ever heard of L. Ron Hubbard. And I want to ask them, which one? The Son or the Father? The God or the man?
Starting over, we're live. You were listening to a special edition of the Mythicist Milwaukee show. We normally broadcast every Sunday night at 7, but due to inclement weather and a technology snafu, we rescheduled tonight's guest, Jamie Dewolf. Jamie, a native of the Bay Area, first became known to audiences as a performance poet. He went on to become a national poetry slam champion, the Oakland and Berkeley Grand Slam champion. This is poetry, not tennis now, folks. Jamie's also a mentor for Youth Speaks, the nation's leading presenter in spoken word education. Jamie has toured the country with his performance trio known as the Suicide Kings. The three-man show premiered at the Living Word Festival in 2007 and then turned worldwide. Jamie has written and directed short films, documentaries, public service announcements, and has also co-directed his first full-length feature film entitled Smoked, which was chosen to premiere at the Oakland Underground Film Festival in 2012. Jamie hosts an acclaimed Bay Area monthly variety show entitled, and I love this, Tourette's Without Regrets, which was awarded Best of Bay by the San Francisco Guardian and a host of other awards. Jamie is also the great-grandson of Scientology's creator L. Ron Hubbard. Jamie is an outspoken church, which enough so to have received some harassment and perhaps a stalking campaign. He was the host of the first ever anti-Scientology summit in Clearwater, Florida, and was a keynote speaker at the international conference in Dublin, Ireland. Hello, Jamie. How are you?
Good afternoon, evening, all those things. How are you?
We're good. We're cold, and we're filled with snow. Hopefully
yeah,
you're not.
I just left your netherworld of ice. I was just out there on tour, and now I'm back in the Bay Area where real weather does not really exist.
That's great. Are you an Oakland Raiders fan?
No, actually, I'm not really into most sports except for fighting. Fighting is kind of the one thing that makes me beat my chest like a gorilla. But other than that, I managed to escape sportsmanship for most of my life, baseball, and I mean the Raiders are fine. They cause quite a bit of riots. So being an Oakland native, you always got to be aware of your riot clock. You know, with the Ferguson verdict going out, there's already people being, warning me about there may be a potential riot in Oakland tonight. So we shall see.
Yes, sir. So it sounds like you're trying to keep your competitions to film directing and slam poetry.
Yeah, that's pretty much my competitive sport, I would say.
All right. Sounds like you're a ringer, right? I've listened to a lot of your stuff. So how did this all get started? Explain some of the genesis of Jamie Dewolf and your kind of bouncing into the public scene.
Well, I mean, I'd always been a writer and a performer since I was a kid, and then that was, carried through to high school, and then I was working on films, a bunch of kind of crazy, wild, dark comedy, action-type films, similar in the style of Smoke when I was young, and then was working on a feature for a while and then left that and then started doing slam. I was just like totally enraptured by slam. It was just awesome. I mean, it was the fact that you have these amazing lyricists get up in bars and you can do any kind of style from comedy to like really raw, confessional, incendiary type writing. And it's in this competitive, crazy environment. and I was just blown away, totally hooked, and did really well. After, I did really poorly. So, I mean, when I first started, I got last place like 3 times in a row, and was basically kind of viewed as sort of this random maniac that just came in off the bus and just came up to the mic and would start screaming about all kinds of madness. And then it sort of taught me to like hone what I was saying. And I think the awesome thing about slams is that it forces you to be aware of the reaction of your words, because you're in a competitive environment. So a lot of open mics can just kind of celebrate just open expression, which is fine. But when you're in a slam, it's like you have to learn how to only have, within 3 minutes, you have to be able to rock an entire room. And, you know, some of the performers I would run with, like, you get a standing ovation in 3 minutes, which is pretty incredible. So you learn how to command an audience and hit the ground running as fast as possible. And just the diversity of the different kind of verses and performers, from rappers to comedians to theatrical weirdos to monologists, just all kind of combining in this demolition derby, was pretty inspiring. So I just never really felt that comfortable just doing one genre. I had aspects of kind of rap and comedy and theater already sort of infused into my work, and then slam seemed to be the one arena where all these things could collide.
So it sounds like you have a lot of fun when things are going well, because obviously you've won awards. What happens when, like you said, you got 3 last places? Is it like the Showtime at the Apollo and you can get booed off stage, or how bad is bad?
It's a pretty big smash to your ego if you really care. I mean, I kind of view it as that the best revenge is always to get better. So I just was tenacious and just kind of kept coming back. I think that they were dismayed at first that I kept returning. And then I think it was like in my maybe 4th or 5th slam, I ended up getting up on the Oakland Slam team, and that was in '99. And I went to Chicago to the National Slam. We battled teams from all over the U.S. And coming from the sort of suburban hellhole that I did, which was Benicia and Vallejo, and like living in the gutter basically, and then coming to this event where there's people from all over the world who were all lyricists and all have their own different backgrounds, and meeting people who are ex-gangbangers and ex-Black Panthers and youth leaders and, you know, just kind of crazy maniacs all colliding in this big destruction derby of words, made me realize that that's where I wanted to be. That's where I should belong. And so, I mean, it just kind of kick-started this whole sort of crazy other side story to my entire life. And then now I think is much more of a hybrid of doing films by day and then performing at night. And that's pretty much all I do now.
So you started with no experience at all then, and when you first got up to slam.
Right. I mean, I would be writing pieces on napkins and writing pieces on the bus, and, you know, I didn't even know how to edit my work at all. I had never really read it out loud. And, you know, you're going against some pretty polished and seasoned performers. People have been on teams for like 10 years running, you know, champions and all that kind of stuff. And so it was very much like a steel sharpens steel kind of deal. I mean, you know, and I think that it celebrated so many different styles that you could take a lot of risks and kind of do whatever style you wanted. And that kind of fit my sort of aesthetic anarchy of, you know, doing really brutal pieces about molestation or sadomasochism, and then, you know, rants on apocalypse, and then turning around and then doing a pretty little love poem to my daughter. And, you know, I mean, it just, there wasn't a lot of aesthetic judgment in terms of what kind of material you can do. I mean, if you're a stand-up comic, you got to be delivering laughs about every 20 seconds. You know, if you're a rapper, you obviously have to rhyme. If you're a slam poet, you can pretty much do whatever you want. So there's a lot. Yeah, there's just a much more terrain to kind of throw whatever you wanted up the canvas.
Yeah, the first I saw you was, I don't know how, I tend to link through YouTube probably too much. And I came across your The God and the Man slam poetry reading.
Yeah.
I think that was at the snapjudgment.org festival, if I'm right. Is that right?
Yeah, it was one of the live shows for maybe like the second or third live show that Snap Judgment did.
Okay. Yeah, can you tell the audience a little bit about that? That was excellent. I encourage people to YouTube this. If you look up Jamie Dewolf, snapjudgment.org, it should get right to it. But tell us how you came up with that, coming from 3 last places to a major award.
Well, I mean, that's been a story that has sort of haunted my life for, since the beginning. I mean, L. Ron Hubbard is my great-grandfather. My grandfather was L. Ron Hubbard, and I knew my grandfather very well. Saw him all the time, really. And he was in the later years of his life, and he was sick, and he had been battling his father's creation for, 10, 20 years at that point. And I was the first of all of the grandkids. So, the L. Ron Hubbard Jr. was L. Ron's first child, and then L. Ron Jr.'s first child was my mother, and then I was her first child. So I was kind of the first kid who started poking around and asking questions. And I'd been a writer ever since I could remember. And I knew that L. Ron Hubbard was a writer. I didn't know he was a cult leader. I had no idea what Scientology was. And, kind of found out later that was just a word we just didn't say in the household. And so I started poking around. I didn't have the internet then, but I knew in every bookstore I could walk into, I could find my great-grandfather's works. And it was incredibly inspiring to me because he had these kind of wild, insane book covers of, aliens holding laser guns and, big-breasted women on top of flaming cars, and referring to the Mission Earth 10-volume series. And, I knew that they were coming out basically while I was alive. And so I kept wondering why I couldn't meet him. I was like, Mom, why can't I meet my great-grandpa? And she's like, well, he just doesn't want to be found right now, honey. He's gone. And at that point, of course, I found out later that he had been hiding and been an outlaw for about a decade at that point. And that him and my grandfather were kind of locked in this sort of cat and mouse kind of revolving battle that had, gone on for years. And that my grandfather had been actually trying to flush his father out of hiding by litigating and basically trying to seize his assets and basically making him prove that he was still alive somewhere, which is incredibly damaging to Scientology because so many people wanted L. Ron for all kinds of reasons, to show up or to get served with summons. And, L. Ron Jr. was trying to flush him out of hiding. And so anyways, when I grew up, I was not raised a Scientologist in any way. I was raised as a pretty fanatically Christian kid. And I had always sort of had this kind of crazy bent towards writing and performing ever since I was a kid. And so in other cases, I started asking more questions and, learning more on my own, and then also kind of asking some of my aunts and uncles as I got older to try to find out the real story. I realized that much of the story was sort of hidden from me. And some of that was to be protected. Some of that was they felt that they had been trying to escape this entire beast, for years, and had been on the run from surveillance and operatives and private investigators and the harassment for decades. Some of the lines that I use in there about my grandfather coming home to pictures in his mailbox or all of his, children playing alone and unguarded on empty playgrounds to remind him that the eye of the pyramid never blinks. So, that line is very specific because that actually happened often. My mother would remember constantly being followed and, that her dad showing her how to use a gun, after these photographs popped up, he showed all of them how to use a gun. He's like, you need to know how to use this in case it comes to that. And so they really lived under the shadow of Scientology. And that, was something that they wanted to shield their children from and to make sure that we didn't have to go through the same experience. But, of course, it being in my nature, I was the one that just sort of started swinging at the monster again. And in a way, it's like I had to understand who L. Ron was because I needed to understand how that fused through me. Me and my brother were the two redheads in the family, and we were both little hypermaniac, little trouble starters from pretty early on. And the line I echo in there about the first time I saw a psychiatrist, and he asked me if mental illness runs in my family. And it sort of played as a joke in the piece, but that was true. I mean, the first time I saw a shrink when I was like 15, 16, and had been having all kinds of, emotional, crazy adolescent instability and flashes of violence and so on, and all of that fun, young hellion type phase. And, and then he would ask me, he was like, well, at first he didn't believe me, and he literally wrote it down and thought that I was just creating these fantasies.
This is the psychiatrist, right?
Yes. He didn't believe me at all. And then he actually did the research, and the next time I saw him, he was like, my God, he's like, you're really related to L. Ron Hubbard. I said, yeah, that's what I said. And he's like, I'm sorry, I didn't believe you. I didn't understand. And I was trying to understand what made L. Ron tick. It's easy to just say someone was a fanatical cult leader. That's too simplistic. That actually doesn't describe a human being. There's the inner mechanics, there's the energy level, there's the mania, there's the prolific volume of work that he just pumped out constantly. And it's also just easy to be like, well, he must have been crazy, but what flavor of crazy? How is he crazy? In what way was he crazy? Because my brother looks exactly like him. He went bald at the same age, had the same red neon hair, and my brother's been a hyper motor mouth, ever since he was young. So in a way, it's like I'm almost kind of missing this kind of, I'm missing the answer to the riddle of who he really was, because he spent so much of his life lying and covering and protecting it. And so that sort of started an early search of just trying to understand who this guy actually was, and to try to sift through the self-propagated myths, the barrage of just like fantasy that he created as both a wall and as kind of a form of brainwashing in of itself, and also to cover up all of his dark tracks, and his occultic underpinnings and his pathological pattern of lies throughout the for years and years. And so that kind of started that, and then asking a lot of questions and getting some pretty uncomfortable answers. And in '99, actually, when I started performing, I first wrote a really long kind of rant off it that I just wrote one night and read it at a cafe, and then it got put online. And literally within 2 days of it going online, Scientology operatives were hunting me down and had been following me and tried to track me and all this. They just acted immediately like everything I had heard about. Right away.
When they come after you, or when they threaten, do they stay anonymous while they do it, or do they come right out and say, "This is who we are"?
They came with this whole cover story saying that they've been going around to different locations and had even confronted the mother of my daughter, and they told her that they were poets putting on a show with me. They never introduced themselves as Scientologists. They have this whole cover story, and I think in general they actually didn't really quite know what they were trying to find out, because when they ended up confronting and running into my mother, she knew immediately who they were right away. Not by sight. She just says that she can recognize them somehow. She says it's their eyes. She says there's something about this dead, flat like shark eyes that they have is how she would phrase it. But they tried to drop the same line on her, and she's like, "That's not what you're here for. Who are you?" And she kept pressing and pressing, and then finally they said, "Oh, well, we'd like to talk to him about this piece that he read." And she's like, "What, the L. Ron Hubbard piece?" And they're like, "Well, yes. So you're aware that your son is claiming that he's the great-grandson of L. Ron Hubbard?" And they said, "Yeah, he is. You're talking to his granddaughter right now." And that took him for a bit of a shock, and then she ended up kicking him the hell off her porch. And then after that, I got a phone call from an anonymous gentleman who was putting together this event in Clearwater, and he thought it would be cool if I came out and kind of hosted this event. And it was the first event, I think, of its kind in Clearwater. But when I finally went to Clearwater and saw the whole scope of Scientology, with its own bus lines and hundreds of surveillance cameras, and how they had just completely consumed this city. I was flabbergasted. I mean, it was pretty terrifying, actually. And also meeting people who had been in Scientology for like 20 years and, had knew L. Ron personally. And, and at that point, Scientology hadn't really hit the kind of cultural forms of exposure that it has now. So South Park hadn't really happened yet. Actually, South Park had just happened, I believe. And so it's like some of this stuff is starting to fly around and disseminate, and Scientology was trying to control all the information on the internet. And a battle which, for this point, they pretty much have completely lost. And so that's what keeps destroying, and inch by inch, day by day, is the fact that people can get on and find out and download anything that they want, including the most innermost top secrets. So in either case, that happened. I went to Clearwater, and then I came back, and I was like, God damn. I was like, this is just massive. How can one little man like myself, this like young, scrappy poet from the gutters of Vallejo, take on this multi-billion-dollar cult conglomerate? And I was like, all right, well, I have a lot more work to do and art to do, and I don't want to be, like, consumed by this. And, for years, people just tell me I should perform about it, write about it or something. I was just like, I just don't even know if it's worth it. The truth is valuable, and anybody that would ask, I would absolutely tell them everything. But, it just got to a point where I was never really aesthetically that happy with that piece. It was just kind of a young man's mess of a rant. And then Snap Judgment was doing an episode on family affairs. And so I said, I got a good family story. and I was actually kind of half kidding, because I was just like, they were like, oh my God, you got to do it. And I was like, you have no idea what kind of impact that would have. Like, your show may get sued, you may get followed, and they actually consulted with some lawyers, and they're like, you know what? Like, you're telling the story of your family. They looked at the transcript, and they're like, this is your story. So it's like you're able to tell the story of your family, which I believe in anyway. But I wrote that piece a week before I performed it, and I had hosted a show in a wrestling ring literally the night before, and my life is literally like that. So it's like I was hosting a show with full-on insane, full wrestling matches and a freestyle rap battle the night before, and then in the morning was sipping tea to get my voice back and trying to memorize this new piece. And I don't really think I totally was cognizant of the impact that it would have. Much of it at that point, I was just like, I really want to get this right and, perform it right, really from my family. To me, it was really important. Like, my mom was in the audience, and I wanted to do our story, with guts and just do it as viciously honest as I possibly could, it's such a vast subject to, like, tackle. It's insane. What do you talk about? Good God. Like, what they believe, who L. Ron really was, the size and scope of their criminal actions, the 70s where they're breaking into all kinds of governments and trying to overthrow the world, basically. It's one of the craziest stories of the entire century, and really difficult to, like, sink your teeth in on, like, how do you tell this in, like, under 7 minutes? And I think what I really realized is that this is really the story of a father and a son, and I think that there's something so tragic about their entire relationship. Because my grandfather helped invent and create a lot of these kind of protocols that they would later inflict on members who were trying to leave.
Yeah, he was part of the faithful for about 10 years, right, before he started to
yeah, and in the early days, too. So
right.
He was also, he was very directly involved with a lot of fair game policies, and, he freely admitted that he went and shook down people for Scientology and would extort them and blackmail them and
How do you
beat them up
somebody?
if he had to.
Like, did they have personal files on them saying, well, we'll expose you cheating on your wife? Or
hidden cameras as well.
Yeah, it's a pretty ingenious and clever little hustle they got. So for your basic process, I guess it would be like, what they call auditing, and we would think of, arguably it would be like a session with your psychiatrist. But what they do is they hook you up to an e-meter, which is basically an electrified kind of polygraph device, basically. And they put you under a form of hypnosis. That's, pretty controversial as to people whether like it's full hypnosis. Definitely hypnotic, that is for certain. And there's a fair amount of repetition. And what they're trying to do is trying to sink you deeper into your subconscious so that you can identify these traumatic memories that have happened, is what they're saying on the surface. What they're also doing is that they're literally digging for every kind of sexual perversity, every secret you've ever kept, anything that you're embarrassed or ashamed about. I mean, they're digging for the dirt. Now, that dirt is put into your case file. And that case file does not go home with you. That case file sits at the Scientology office and can be accessed anytime they want. And there is no legal statute for any kind of, there's no psychiatric client privilege. I mean, there's none of that.
It's not HIPAA protected. Interesting.
Yeah, there's no precedent for it. So that's happened over and over and over again. People who try to leave the church and then they dig up, some dirt, and they're like, well, you might want to think about that before you leave,
right.
Because we have this, and this on you. There's a lot of claims that's why certain celebrities are pretty much ensnared in the church, and that they're pretty much stuck, because if they leave, then some of this stuff is going to get exposed. Yeah. And, I mean, that's the thing, is they basically own all of your confessions.
Right.
And this is not an agreement between them and God. This is an agreement with Scientology Incorporated alone. They own your confessions.
Right.
So good luck trying to get those back. So that's an early step. That's an early thing that they do. And also it's pretty ingeniously constructed to, kind of mentally break you down from the get-go. And part of that is this entire illusion of who L. Ron really was, that he was mankind's greatest friend, which he loves to state. Mankind's greatest friend, L. Ron Hubbard. And a lot of the mechanics of the actual process of itself involves kind of hypnosis, but also involves this kind of Machiavellian, Orwellian structure that they have, where you're always moving towards salvation. You're always moving towards, greater mental powers and to becoming this sort of superhuman, super cosmic, powerful being, this godlike being just puppeteering your flesh. And as you move towards it, anytime that you're in doubt, they already have an answer for you as to why you're in doubt. And also that they just keep moving the finish line. So I mean, it's just like you start from trying to get clear, and then you start going into your operating Satan powers, where you're going to learn, telepathy and telekinesis, and be able to travel through space and time. And, I mean, these people who have literally gotten all the way to the top, like OT level 8, at that point you spend up to, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think the last estimate was like $150,000 to try to get to their top state. But they can also keep moving the finish line as much as they want. And the problem is that at a point you're paying to brainwash yourself, which is incredibly painful and, to admit to yourself. So, I mean, meeting people who've been in there for 20 years, I mean, it's really horrifying to see what it's done to them, and to kind of see them shake loose of this whole, entire structure that's pretty much set up in a very ingenious and brilliant way to sort of systematically break you down and remove your will.
Like World of Warcraft, right? But not as fun. Sean.
Well, I mean, there is actually literally aspects of role-play gaming that it uses.
Wow.
So, I mean, one of it is that the same way that you have to run around and grind in Warcraft, to get your experience points and level up. That's literally a very simplistic way to look at Scientology. You have to grind on hours and hours of auditing because you're trying to level up. And you're trying to become this superhuman, super badass being, but it just takes all of these hours, thousands of dollars. They can kick you back at any point, and you have this kind of crazy rule, and then you get more and more lost in this fantasy world.
It's like experience debt when you die, right? Wow.
Well, yeah. I mean, imagine you're sitting there, you're holding this polygraph device, you got these kind of electrified juice cans that you're holding in each hand that's reading your blood pressure and your sweat and your anxiety. You're getting asked a whole lot of invasive questions. You're asked to regress into your brain and go back in time through billions of years to remember the different past alien lives that you've had. Now, you can just make up whatever you want, you know? I mean, you really can. It's like basically you're kind of going off on this fantastical trip. And we could talk all day about whether, you know, past life experiences exist and whatnot. But, I mean, are people, you know, actually regressing to become alien chariot riders on planet Neptune 3 billion years ago? I'm going to guess that's doubtful.
Right.
I'm going to guess that some of that is fictitious and some of that is suggestive. And, you know, you just keep kind of going deeper and deeper down this crazy hole, you know. And, I mean, part of that I'm sure is addictive, the same way that Warcraft or porn or anything else is addictive. I mean,
Right.
I mean, it's there's reasons why it works. People are always like, well, oh my God, how would people believe that kind of craziness? It's like, well, I grew up Christian. We drank blood and ate flesh every Sunday and held hands and, you know, all like wiped our eyes at our zombie messiah,
Right.
you know, who's nailed to a plank, bleeding for sins that were committed before I was even born. You know, I mean, people can believe whatever they want, and Scientology was very cleverly tailored for this century and to kind of prey on people's narcissism, their love of fantasy, and also this kind of crazy power structure which rewards paranoia and rewards this, you know, inescapable hunt and hunger to become a better version of you.
Yeah. And Jamie, I applaud your courage. This is Sean Frasick. I applaud your courage for coming out against the church because, as you were explaining before, with the smear campaigns, I mean, they're in the news all the time. I mean, you can look up any diffractor from Scientology and see kind of how the church has gone after them in one way or another. And this show is catered to essentially what you're talking about when you spoke to Christianity and drinking the blood and eating the bread of the body. You know, we like to discuss those types of traditions that people don't understand, and we're really excited to have you on, coming from Scientology, because it's like one of the black holes for us. We kind of know the arguments, we know the story, but we don't have people necessarily talking about them, and I think that's why people find it fascinating. The more you learn about these religions, the more, you know, you can like kind of say, well, you know, it's BS or whatever. One of the questions that came up to us the last time we had the show and we got postponed was the billion-year contract in the Sea Organization. Has there ever been anybody that has come back that has said that they've died and have come back to lend their second life into this contract? Do you know of anything like that?
You know, I don't. That's actually a fine question. So to clarify, the billion-year contract you sign when you join the Sea Org. And the Sea Org, you can kind of think is like the Knights Templar, like they're the elite. They're like the inner circle. Some people compare them to the Nazi SS. You know, I mean, they're the elite fanatical group that surrounds the leader and will do anything at all costs. The tragedy of it is that most often that they're the most exploited. So they're the ones that are put in slave camps. They're the ones that are just subjected to kind of terrible human abuses and, you know, all kinds of vicious interrogations. They're the ones that get smashed on if they try to leave the church, because they're kind of really part of the actual hidden infrastructure of the church. And the way that they achieve your allegiance, you know, through a lot of different protocols and processes, but one of them is that when you join the Sea Org, you sign a billion-year contract, meaning that anytime that you die, you know, you got, what is it, like 50 years or something to, like, find a new meat vessel to, like, launch your soul in and to get your ass right down to a Scientology office and get right the hell back to work, which to me sounds like hell. I mean, at least Christians, you just have one shot on your little puppet masquerade of a morality tale, and and then you You get to heaven or you get to hell. That's it. You get one shot. You know, Scientology, it's like you're just basically, you're going to work forever for a billion years. I don't know if they've actually done, if they've ever had a kid. You know, you think that Scientology is basically, Dianetics kind of starts in 1950, which at that time, and this is the other thing, is that I really try to focus on, and there's some of the encoded words that I have in the opening intro of The God and the Man, where I talk about how he turned, science into, science into a religion. Is that Dianetics, when it first came out, was never proposed as a religion. It was proposed as a science. It was proposed as the new science of the modern mind, right? And it was, or I may be paraphrasing, or it might be modern science of the new mind, or whatever. But that was its basic catchphrase. I mean, that's what it was trying to sell you, is that this is a new science that has been created and engineered by this amazing world-traveling science fiction author, submarine commander, dogfighting pilot. Guys traveled the world and studied to the feet of mystics, and he has distilled all of his brilliant searches and adventures into this brand new, cutting-edge, revolutionary science. Now, it was never proposed as a religion. However, is that after he started selling a gangload of books, it turned into an insane success. It made him rich pretty much overnight. And then he went bankrupt in almost like 3-4 years or less. You know what I mean? Like, he horribly mismanaged his money. And as someone pointed out, a science, the difference between science and religion is that a science is supposed to be able to be replicated. So if you teach me how to make fire, then I can learn that skill and I can go do it. I don't need you anymore, you know? And so that was part of the reason why he was losing money, is that people were learning these practices. They were sort of pushing them in their own way and trying to apply it. And then he wasn't able to be like the fountainhead of it. And then what he did is he actually changed it almost literally overnight when they started getting pounded by the IRS into a religion. And, I mean, there's even documentation of this, like when they telex all of their different orgs, and they're like, all right, we're a religion now, so, you know, if you want to wear a clerical collar or whatever, here's our new cross symbols, you know what I mean? And, I mean, they absolutely transition rapidly overnight. Now, that's unique. You know, I don't think that even, you know, the Church of Mormon ever proposed of like, okay, this is a science. I mean, wait a minute. No, it's a religion. Right? Mm-hmm. And the thing is that even in most of their selling points and their propaganda to people walking in their offices, they don't really, how they sell it to you is that you can be any religion you want, and you can still be a Scientologist because they're really just trying to make a better you.
You have, Jamie,
right?
You have no idea. We actually visited a local Scientology church, or whatever you want to call it, and the lady that was running the facility actually told us exactly that.
Yes, and that is actually also a lie.
So I mean, it's not an exclusive religion, then. It's not exclusionary to something else.
Well, that's how they sell it.
They say that, but of course, the deeper you go into it, what you actually find out is that people like Jesus and different religions were actually implants put into our brains, basically by our dominant alien overlords.
Awesome.
So they leave that part out.
Hey, Jamie, this is Antonio, again, the other producer for this show.
Hey.
And thank you so much for being on the show and being flexible and coming back for another time. Question, where do you think the Church of Scientology is right now? Are they clawing right now to stay afloat, to stay alive? Is Clearwater, Florida just a haven where Scientology is growing? Or do you feel that the community in Clearwater is transitioning, because they seem to be the largest landowners in downtown Clearwater, Florida?
Well, also L.A. They own a monstrous amount of real estate in L.A. I think it's even said that they even own more than most of the film studios in L.A. So Clearwater is basically where L. Ron got off the boat after running around for almost a decade. That's where he snuck off the boat, and they just smashed on that town because that town had no idea what they were expecting, no idea who they were, and they just made it their stronghold, just literally by force of will and money.
That's really the truth. We always wonder if there is a parallel between becoming clear and then picking Clearwater, Florida.
I wonder if they ever even thought of that. I have no idea.
Now you're thinking like a Scientologist.
Yes.
That's not a bad. That's a nice little twist there. I don't think anybody's ever actually said that. That would be brilliant. I think we're giving him too much credit. I think right now is actually one of the most. What's crazy is that in '99, when I wrote that piece, the first kind of version of me going, talking about my family and its effect on me. That the first time I did that, they acted exactly like Scientologists were expected to act. They came right to my house. They had private investigators follow me. I mean, they were just, bam, like textbook. Everything you read about. Now, and to be completely upfront is that they were actually a fraction of what they've done to other people. I mean, what they've done to other people has just been absolutely brutal, hellacious, and criminal, right? The kind of surveillance and harassment and just, bomb threats. And I mean, anybody should just Google the story of Paulette Cooper and the scandal of Scientology, and you see they are nasty. I mean, it's literally like going to war with the CIA or an army of ex-girlfriends that wants to kill you.
All right.
And I mean, yeah, they're nasty. They're so nasty. So, however, is that in the last 15 years since then, is that with the advent of the internet, which they absolutely tried to smother and snuff out as soon as they could in the beginning. Because what would happen is that you're always trying to unlock the next secret level, right? And they're like, these levels you have to pay to earn. You have to put in your hours to earn, hundreds, thousands of hours to unlock these levels, all right? Think World of Warcraft. You're trying to get into the castle. You can't get in that castle unless you're level 25. Right. Well, what the internet did is it just gave cheat codes to everything. It's just like, look, you want to see what's in that castle? This is what's in that briefcase, and I'll tell you, it's all lies. And what Scientology doesn't tell you any of this stuff. Right. If you walk in a Scientology thing and you're like, do you guys believe in aliens or what's this alien thing? And they're like, no, there's not aliens. That's propaganda. That's the press. Here, read a book and find out for yourself. It's absolutely about aliens. Dead on, absolutely about aliens.
That's great.
No joke. No lie on that.
We want to ask you. We promised not to hook you up to an e-meter, but like, what are your personal views on religion? I remember you writing that your grandfather told you, don't believe everything you read, but believe everything you say. Would that sum up your stance, or how? I want you to opine for what you believe.
Growing up incredibly Christian. And I mean, my brother was raised the same way, but it just never really affected him that much. He just didn't really care. He's one of those people who's like, yeah, I'll go to church, but I'm going to flirt with girls and whatever. I don't really care. I don't really read this stuff. But I was pretty fanatical, and I started asking questions earlier. I have just a very inquisitive nature, and I'm always trying to dig, and I would just ask a lot of questions that I would get really uncomfortable answers to, or answers that just didn't make any sense, there's Adam and Eve, and, they have two sons, and one son murders the other son, and so then there's three people left on the earth, and they're the only three people that we know of. Where does the rest of humanity come from?
Great question.
Or does that mean, if Anne Frank was Jewish, does that mean that Anne Frank is now burning in hell for eternal damnation? Stuff like that. And then, just kind of basic questions as a Christian that were just really troubling to me as a young kid. And then I started doing a lot of research and actually read the Bible, which some Christians really have it. And, and when you really start actually looking for the hand of man, in constructing these religions, right? If you are able to make the logical leap that maybe the Bible was not written by God, but was in fact sort of a historical mixtape that was edited by several different rulers and conquerors, used as a form to control differing forms of society, and that there had been many different potential songs on this mixtape, and they got edited out because some actually celebrated femininity, and some said Jesus didn't die at all. Some say that Jesus actually died, but he wasn't resurrected, that he was just resurrected in our spirit, on and on and on. And so it just made me so angry that we are so pervasive, especially in American culture, with Judeo-Christian kind of Christianity ideals, that we don't question a lot of the actual underpinnings to it. And so to me, I'm always fascinated by religion because I view it from a different way. of that there's always some sort of hustle behind it. Who is this benefiting? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, who is this benefiting at the moment? How does it change people's ideals? And then once they buy into it, I mean, the fact that Christianity is such is a religion that is all about absolutes. There's heaven, hell, black, white, saint, sinner, God, devil. That's it. You know, and you don't even have a feminine aspect of it. You know, you have God, the Father, the Son, and a ghost. There's literally, you have a menage a trois, and there's no woman around. You got a ghost and a dad and a son. So I mean, it's just whole absolutes. And if you just kind of take that basically as a concept, a whole lot of American foreign policy makes sense. The kind of way that we treat sex and violence makes sense. And the sort of view that we have against the world. And you kind of see these values perpetuated in a pervasive way. So to me, in terms of religion, I'm fascinated by religion. And I've read a lot about, you know, I mean, a lot of people just don't dig hard enough. I mean, it's like, you know, the Hare Krishna, like they had a whole spot where had their top members were, you know, running guns and trying to create whole temples with tons and tons of marble and ivory that they were like flying in from all different countries, and a bunch of them got busted for embezzlement and, you know, all these different kind of hustles. Like the whole story of Mormonism is effing crazy. You know, I mean, it's totally insane. And now they just finally had to admit, like, oh, well, yes, he was married to a 13-year-old girl, and yes, he had 40 wives, but, you know, he didn't really want to do it. It was the golden books that were buried in the woods. And, you know, I feel that I don't believe this whole, like, you know, well, we got to respect everyone's belief. No, you don't. You know what I mean? Like, no, we don't. No one respects Satanist beliefs, and at least they have a sense of humor half the time, you know? And I'm just like, I mean, I absolutely and completely comfortably don't believe in anything. I have felt my entire life, I grew up being absolutely tortured by visions of hell. I, you know, consumed pictures of hell, I was obsessed with hell. You know, I mean, I grew up being told every Sunday that I was going to see the Antichrist rise to power in my lifetime. You know, and all of these rumors that Gorbachev was the Antichrist and that the Visa company was creating an entire machine called the Beast, and that we were going to have tattoos of our personal identities. This is stuff that's getting told to me when I'm like 6 to 12 years old. This is my entire worldview. And so for me to sort of dismantle that and have to dismantle it by myself, and my parents are still incredibly religious. And actually, we got to a point we just don't really talk about it anymore. We can take swings on Scientology all day, but God forbid I take a stab at Christianity or like, so, hey, Mom, you read about the Dead Sea Scrolls? You know, like, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the Gospel of Judas.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, let's
So,
you know, let's get in there and let's see if this is interesting. Is that, you know, I got to a point where I feel like people just don't like to view their religions with any sense of context that's larger than their own hunger for meaning. And I feel like it's kind of like whatever you want to believe in, you know, is like if you're going to just have a belief handed to you because that's where you were born or that's what your parents believe in, you're taking out your own individual, like, constructive thought. And anytime you throw on magic, I'm a performer, I do vaudeville. You know, I mean, I understand the mechanics of live performance, and, you know, Jim Jones was a badass showman too.
Yeah.
I mean, he was you know, he had his magic tricks and the healing people and snakes, and I mean, it's all the same. It's theater. You know, it's the theater of it is church and the theatricality of church, and then if you add on the magic of, you know, the religious aspects, it's just like a lot of these are the same mechanics. You know, whether you're Wiccan or whether you're a Christian on their knees, a lot of times you're still throwing your energy towards like a larger kind of benevolent power that has your back and is going to hopefully give good things for you. So to me, it's like, why don't you just make it up? You know, I mean, have you ever heard George Carlin's I Pray to the Sun bit?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
He talks about he's going to make Joe Pesci his new god, and that he's going to start worshiping the sun again because at least he can see it, and it actually tangibly gives life to everything on the planet.
Well, actually,
and without it, we all die.
I mean, here's the thing. You know, you had alluded and mentioned the internet and how the internet now has given everybody the power to do research. And although you can write anything on the internet and not everything is true, it's enough of a tool where you can now begin to decode and find out for yourself, for instance, that, we're mythicists here. And, we view Jesus as a mythological sun god. So the fact that George Carlin would speak, to the sun and say, he's my new savior, well, we can go to many sun gods before, Jesus and Horus and Dionysus and
Absolutely.
Attis and all these other sun gods.
Absolutely.
And the thing that, we find very interesting is, we're finding, the fact we believe Jesus didn't even exist, not to be haters, but it's just what we think the evidence is telling us. When you have no historians from the time of Jesus writing about Jesus' existence, the rising of the dead, resurrecting, healing the sick, nobody writes about this during his time period until hundreds of years later. That's enough for us to question. The thing with Scientology and even Mormonism, which is another thing.
I mean, we almost had a Mormon president. We almost had a Mormon president.
Yeah, and the thing, you're right, we did, and at
no point was anybody, clearly Obama's team chose very early on, we are not even going near that with a 10-foot stick.
And that is very interesting you say that, because again,
yeah, because if a Scientologist is running for president, people be like, that's crazy. They're crazy. No way. Right? But you can be a Mormon, we're like, well, we got to respect people's beliefs. Oh, but unless they're a Satanist or unless they're Muslim, then we can bomb them into oblivion because they're godless infidels. I mean, it's like all of this stuff absolutely influences it. I mean, it's also, too, we were talking about the sun god thing, is I really feel like if I had to, be pushed, or if I, had a terminal disease or something, I would literally probably just go old school, read some Greek mythology books, and just pick one to pray to, because so much of it is even the devil, basically being jacked from Dionysus and why he's a goat, and, stuff like that I'm obsessed with, because it's right in front of your face. It's so obvious, and it's carried forth through centuries. And just people don't want to ask the questions, or they're uncomfortable questions. And even if the evidence is absolutely there, it's openly, it's transparent. It's just that they have the force and the power. Christianity does. And that's also why Scientology was able to muscle people into silence for so long, because they're like, shut up, don't talk about that.
But here's the thing with Scientology, it happened in many people's lifetimes. It was created
in our age that's researchable. Yes. When L. Ron started his whole fake, fictitious ass biography, it's like, you had to have been a journalist to really, really dig to counter every one of the myths that he had said about his own life. And I met in person Jerry Armstrong, who was a high-ranked Scientologist. He was in a safe house, literally shredding documents to escape an FBI raid. And he found these 13 boxes in this hidden safe house in the attic that contained all of L. Ron's true personal belongings, his journals, his old photographs, his medical records, his war records. And he, being a fanatic, a religious fanatic, actually contacted L. Ron in hiding. He said, hey, I saved these documents because I feel like now we can really, truly tell your story. And L. Ron had been living in his own myth for so long, he was like, go ahead, write it. And of course, to his horror, he discovered that he had all of the actual evidence to completely unmask his Messiah in this lifetime.
Jamie, this has been awesome. We're running out of time here. I can see why digging into this, and it just creates a bigger mess, might make you want to make a movie where you rob a store that sells weed. Check it out, guys. Google smokedthemovie.com. You can check it out. Look at the trailer. That's great. We definitely want to plug that because it's worth it. And thanks for coming on, Jamie. We really appreciate your time, your energy, all your stories.
Jamie, real quick though, if you can just tell us the movie that you're currently filming, if you can just tell us a little bit about it before we go.
Actually, I do a lot of short films right now. I'm writing another feature, but you can check out all my new shorts on JamieDewolf.com. There's all kinds of different projects and stuff. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, thanks, guys. Let's do another round 2 one day.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Sir, Jamie. Again, this is Antonio. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciated it. Great show.
This has been
all right, thanks, guys.
The Mythicist Milwaukee show from riverwestradio.com, broadcasting from 820 East Center. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Bye.